Leona Helmsley's story begins long before the world knew her as the Queen of Mean. But even in her early years, traces of the persona that would later terrify employees, contractors, and even family were already present. Born Lena Mindy Rosenthal in Brooklyn in 1920, she grew up in a working-class household that struggled financially. She was ambitious, driven by a fierce desire never to feel powerless, poor, or dependent again. That hunger for status would propel her upward, but it would also prove to be the root of her eventual downfall. Over time, she crafted herself into someone glamorous, polished, and commanding. She changed her name to the more elegant-sounding Leona, drifted through jobs in retail and advertising, and eventually entered real estate, an industry where ruthlessness wasn't just tolerated, but often rewarded. She quickly earned a reputation for being sharp, relentless, and absolutely unwilling to be contradicted. Tenants whispered that she had no patience for little people, and even then, the seeds of her most infamous quote were already in the soil. Her life changed forever when she met Harry Helmsley, one of the most powerful real estate magnates in America. Harry owned a vast empire of prime New York real estate, office towers, apartment buildings, and most famously, the legendary Helmsley hotels. Together, they were unstoppable. But what Harry offered in wealth and stability, Leona matched with discipline, aggression, and a laser-focused commitment to image. She wanted perfection in every property that carried her name, and she demanded the same of everyone around her. Employees lived in fear of her surprise inspections. A crooked tablecloth, a fingerprint on a glass, or a housekeeper who dared make eye contact were apparently enough to trigger a tirade. Soon, the media began calling her the Queen of Mean, and she embraced the title as if cruelty was simply the price of excellence. But behind the gleaming marble lobbies and luxury penthouses, a darker pattern was emerging. Leona and Harry began charging massive personal expenses to their hotel businesses, an illegal tactic that would later land her in court. The couple treated the business accounts like a bottomless personal wallet, funneling more than $1.2 million worth of personal luxuries through corporate books. Nothing was too trivial or too extravagant. Custom marble dance floors, a $130,000 high-end sound system, the enclosure for their suburban swimming pool, and even Leona's underwear were quietly billed as business costs. The couple renovated their Connecticut mansion with an opulence that looked ripped from a fantasy palace. Gold-plated fixtures, imported stone, hand-carved woodwork, and entire rooms reimagined from scratch. Every invoice, no matter how obviously personal, was shuffled through the books of the Helmsley Hotel empire. Their contractors noticed. Many of them performed world-class craftsmanship, expecting to be paid according to the agreements they had signed. But when they submitted their bills, they hit a wall of silence, delays, or outright refusal. Leona, obsessed with getting everything for less, routinely bullied contractors into lowering their charges or refused to pay them entirely. For small businesses, this wasn't just frustrating, it was financially devastating. Some companies nearly collapsed under the weight of unpaid invoices. Eventually, several of these contractors banded together and decided they weren't going to be intimidated. They became whistleblowers, taking their complaints to prosecutors and turning over invoices, receipts, and internal memos that laid out a clear pattern. The Helmsleys were masking personal indulgences as corporate expenses, and they had been doing it for years. This sparked one of the most sensational financial crime cases of the decade. When federal investigators got involved, the scale of the fraud became impossible to ignore. The government brought 188 counts against Leona and Harry, including conspiracy, mail fraud, tax evasion, and filing false returns. Harry, whose health was rapidly declining, was deemed unfit to stand trial. That left Leona alone at the defense table, facing what would become a public reckoning for the way she had treated everyone, from employees to contractors to even her own staff. Witness after witness came forward, some shaking on the stand, describing her explosive temper, her verbal abuse, and her total disdain for anyone she perceived as beneath her. In 1989, the jury found Leona Helmsley guilty on 33 felony counts. The courtroom buzzed with shock when the sentence was read: 4 years in federal prison plus a $7.1 million fine. For someone used to commanding an empire, the idea of being confined to a cell seemed unimaginable. She reportedly wept when she learned she was going to prison, but the public had little sympathy. To many, her conviction felt like long-awaited justice, not just for the financial fraud, but for the years of cruelty that people believed she inflicted on those who worked for her. Ultimately, she served 19 months behind bars, followed by home detention and community service. The Queen of Mean had finally been humbled. But even after prison, the oddities of her story didn't end. When she eventually passed away, her will made headlines all over again. She left $12 million, yes, $12 million, to her dog, a temperamental Maltese named Trouble. Her own grandchildren were either left nothing or given strict conditions for inheritance. Even in death, Leona's decisions reflected the same eccentricity, stubbornness, and icy disregard for emotional consequences that had shaped her entire life. Her downfall wasn't simply about tax fraud. It was a collapse built from years of treating people like they didn't matter. Her employees saw her as a tyrant, contractors saw her as a bully, and the public eventually saw her as a symbol of unchecked elitism. A woman so deeply insulated by wealth that she genuinely believed the rules didn't apply to her. Her story became a case study taught in business ethics classes, law schools, and journalism programs. It wasn't just a crime story, it was a moral one. And yet, in an odd way, her life stands as a cautionary tale about the corrosive effect of power without empathy. She had the intelligence, drive, and business instincts to become one of the most successful hotel leaders of her era. She could have been remembered as a visionary in luxury hospitality, a pioneering woman in an industry dominated by men. But instead, history remembers her for her ruthlessness, for her disdain toward those she considered lesser, and for the single quote that overshadowed everything else: "Only the little people pay taxes." Whether she said the exact words or not almost doesn't matter anymore. What mattered was that people believed she could have said it. Her rise was spectacular, her empire glittering, her influence vast. But the higher she climbed, the more detached she became from the real world, from accountability, and from basic human decency. When the reckoning finally came, it wasn't caused by powerful rivals or corporate sabotage. It was caused by the very little people she believed she could crush without consequence. Contractors who refused to be cheated, employees who refused to stay silent, and a justice system that refused to be intimidated by her wealth or reputation. Leona Helmsley built an empire of marble, gold, crystal, and fear. But in the end, it was her own arrogance, not the government, not her enemies, that brought it crashing down. Still, for all her faults, Leona was undeniably gifted. She had an instinct for branding, an unerring eye for detail, and a relentless work ethic. She understood luxury at a visceral level: the weight of thick carpeting, the shine of polished brass, the feel of crisp linens folded exactly the right way. She could walk through a hotel lobby and instantly spot what others overlooked. Her standards, while brutal, were also responsible for transforming the Helmsley properties into some of the most meticulously maintained hotels in New York. It was a paradox that defined her life. The very qualities that built her empire were the same ones that later shattered it. She demanded excellence at all costs, but eventually the cost became too high, measured not in dollars, but in human relationships, legal consequences, and public outrage. As the years went on, the world around her shifted dramatically. The hospitality industry moved toward experiences rather than intimidation, toward warmth rather than control. Competitors embraced customer service philosophies built around empathy and personalization. Younger executives rose to power with fresh ideas about workplace culture and collaboration, concepts that would have made Leona scoff. In many ways, the industry was evolving beyond everything she represented. While her hotels remained financially valuable, the Helmsley name itself gradually became a relic, less a mark of prestige and more a reminder of a notorious chapter in business history. Even the employees who still worked in her properties said that the atmosphere had become lighter, more humane, almost as if the buildings themselves were relieved to no longer be under her daily scrutiny. Behind the scenes, Leona's personal life grew quieter. She remained wealthy, immensely so, but her social circle shrank. Many people who once flocked to her parties or sought her approval now kept their distance, afraid of the unpredictable temper that had made her so infamous. She spent increasing amounts of time inside her heavily secured penthouse, surrounded by luxury but isolated from the world. This isolation sometimes revealed glimpses of vulnerability she had never allowed publicly. She wasn't an easy person to sympathize with, but there were moments when even those close to her wondered whether the persona of the Queen of Mean had become a prison of its own. Perhaps she wore it like armor for so long that she eventually forgot how to remove it. Success had protected her for decades, but without it, she was left with a reputation she could no longer escape. Her later years were marked by philanthropy, though even that was complicated. She donated millions to hospitals, charities, and public institutions. She funded medical research and built facilities that genuinely helped countless people. Yet the public struggled to view her generosity without suspicion. Was it genuine remorse? An attempt to repair her reputation? A final assertion of control in the only way she knew, through money? Whatever the motivation, her donations undeniably made an impact, especially in New York. Some organizations hesitated to publicly acknowledge her, afraid of the baggage attached to her name, but the scale of her contributions couldn't be ignored. Even today, parts of the city benefit from projects she funded, a final paradox in a legacy full of contradictions. Her will created chaos in a way that felt shockingly on-brand. The decision to leave $12 million to her dog became an international sensation, sparking lawsuits, public debate, and endless late-night jokes. Trouble the Maltese instantly became one of the wealthiest pets on Earth, complete with a personal security detail after receiving multiple kidnapping threats. Meanwhile, some of Leona's own grandchildren were cut out of the inheritance entirely or given conditional sums that required strict adherence to certain family expectations. For many, the will was the final confirmation of what they had always believed. Leona valued loyalty and obedience above all else, even in death. But for others, it was simply another chapter in the life of a woman who consistently defied norms, sometimes brilliantly, sometimes disastrously. Even decades later, her name still triggers strong reactions. Some admire her business acumen, others see her as a cautionary tale. Many view her as both, proof that brilliance and cruelty can coexist in the same person, and that success without humility can be every bit as destructive as failure. She left behind a complicated legacy, a mixture of towering achievements and unforgettable scandals, of philanthropy and pettiness, of empire building and self-destruction. And ultimately, her story endures because it touches on something fundamental: the human tendency to believe that power justifies everything, that wealth erases consequences, and that the rules are flexible for those who have enough influence to bend them. Looking back, her story feels almost Shakespearean. She rose from a modest Brooklyn childhood to command one of the most powerful real estate empires in America, but the same ambition that propelled her also destroyed her. Confidence became arrogance, perfectionism became cruelty, power became isolated. Leona Helmsley lived her life believing she could control every environment she entered, every room, every employee, every contractor, every narrative. But the one thing she could never control was how the world would remember her. And in the end, her legacy became the final thing she could not rewrite.